Attention, Senators. The legislature is scheduled to reconvene in 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber. The afternoon session is about to reconvene. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you. Do you have any items for the record?
I do, Mr. President. Motions to be printed from Senator Kavanaugh to LB 1170 and 1017. Additionally, notice that the Government Committee will have an executive session in room 2022 at 2 o'clock. Government Committee exec session in room 2022 at 2 o'clock. That's all I have at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Please proceed with the first item on the agenda.
Mr. President, first item on the agenda, Legislative Bill 1087. First of all, Senator, there are E&R amendments.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the E&R amendments to LB 1087 be adopted.
Members, you have heard the motion to adopt the E&R amendments. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. They are adopted.
Mr. President, Senator Jacobson would move to amend the bill with AM 2760.
Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. AM 2760 is really an amendment that really cleans up language in the bill. That was language that was brought by the Legislative Fiscal Office as they reviewed it. There have been a lot of iterations of this bill from the beginning for everyone to understand how this program works. And so we worked with the governor's office, so we worked with fiscal, and then ultimately now the Legislative Fiscal Office came back with some language changes just to clarify exactly what we're doing. Just to remind everyone, this bill, and as the amendment would suggest, they've now estimated, rather than the hospital's assessment being around $650 million, it's probably going to be $581 million. But then there we would be looking at about almost 2.2 times match from the federal government, which is actually going to bring in another $1.4 billion to the state. I think the key pieces here, one of the things that they'd modified was the Nebraska Center for Nursing Board. We changed actually a title to one of those, to that fund that would still be under the DHS's control. There's about $35 million that will stay at the state to be used for expenses for this program. And additionally, there would be another $50 million that would be paid by the hospitals for nursing scholarships. So if you add those two numbers together, you're about $85 million net to the state, or programs that the state would otherwise be considering funding. So that's the way the bill works. And I think I want to clarify too, when you look at the fiscal note, that there is no hard expenditure on this. The fiscal note comes back technically as a negative fiscal note because of the $35 million that comes back. All the expenses are covered, plus the dollars that are going for the nursing scholarships. But I think the key we want to focus on here is the fact that these are dollars that are coming to the state that otherwise would require additional provider rate increases. And this is also going to help get more Medicaid patients covered that aren't covered today. And it's also going to help save these hospitals who are struggling. We all read about the hospital in Friend that has now gone to an emergency services only. There are other hospitals on the edge of doing that. This is a lifeline to rural hospitals and hospitals in urban areas in Omaha and Lincoln that are going to benefit from these funds coming in to better serve and increase the quality of the outcomes of the services that they provide. As it was said before, there are 44 other states that are in this program. This is set up in such a way that because the hospitals would have to come up with the assessment on the front end, there is a note in here that up to $640 million could be moved from the cash fund to front the hospital's stake in this until they receive their first quarterly payment back from the government. And then as we move through the year, the hospitals would receive their money and would refund that back to the state so that that would not be an expenditure. It would be basically a loan to the fund and the dollars coming back, no net expenditure. So if you read clear through the fiscal note at the end, there is a zero net fiscal note. So with that, Mr. President, I would encourage everyone to vote a green vote on 2760 and LB 1087. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Mr. Clerk, for an agenda item.
Mr. President, Senator Jacobson would move to amend the amendment with FA 243.
Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to open on FA 243.
Thank you, Mr. President. Floor Amendment 243. You'll notice in the amendment that when we first had the conversation, when I was working with the governor's staff, we talked about a sunset. The concern with the sunset is that it's set to expire in 2027. That really doesn't begin to give us much time to even really look at the program. At the time we had those discussions about the sunset, I think we were all trying to understand exactly how the program works. Now that we've had the time to work through all of the iterations of the amendments and get this set up, the concern that I have at this stage of the game is that I don't believe that there's a need for a sunset. And so the floor amendment would strike the sunset and allow this program to move forward, obviously recognizing the legislature can stop these programs at any time. All it takes is a bill to stop it or stop the transfers and the program comes to an end. My concern is where there's no fiscal note, the state's actually benefiting from the program and the hospitals are benefiting from these dollars coming from the federal government. Why would we want to sunset the program? And why would we want to put doubt in the hospitals' minds that they've got to be cognizant of not only will the federal dollars continue to flow, which we believe they will, but just as importantly, will a future legislature say, we don't want to do this? So given that we're going to be limited in the future to bringing 20 bills, I don't see a need to have to come back in 2 years or any time in the future and re-implement the program where we can stop the program at any time along the way, really through the Appropriations Committee. So that's what the floor amendment's about. I would encourage your support to move the bill through so that we can have this program continue to have a life to move forward. I think the benefits are all there to move this bill forward the way it is without a sunset. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Reapy, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of AM 2760 and FA 243 and the underlying bill of LB 1087. I will make my remarks brief, and that is that I find a sense of sadness that we are unable to pay adequate reimbursement for the patients that are cared for on behalf of the state through Medicaid, and that this is the direction that we have to go. I also have a concern, where do we go into the future? And it's going to be an issue that we are pushing, if you will, down the road, and we're going to have to address at some point. That's all I have to say. I do support it and hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. See no one else in the queue. Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to close on the floor amendment and waive. Members, the question is the adoption of FA 243. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
36 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on adoption of the amendment.
FA 243 is adopted. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to close and waive closing on AM 2760. The question is the adoption of AM 2760. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
40 ayes, no nays, on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 1087 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 1087 to ENR engrossing. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 905, select file. I do not have ENR amendments. Senator Reapy would move to amend with AM 2766.
Senator Reapy, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning or good afternoon, Senators. I introduced AM 2766 to LB 905, addresses three critical needs in the implementation of LB 905, the Homeless Respite Center, Respite Care Center. The first is, in addition, it adds to an implementation date of October 1, 2025 rather than July 1. And the reason is to allow DHHS time to develop the rules, regulations necessary to implement this project. The second condition is it provides the statutory authority for DHHS to license adult homeless respite care facilities. The third one is to change the appropriation source from general funds to the Medicaid Managed Care Excess Profit Fund. These are simple changes but needed to assure the proper implementation and correct funding of LB 905. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. See no one else in the queue. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2766. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
39 ayes, no nays, on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Senator.
Returning to the queue, Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Reapy yield to a question?
Senator Reapy, will you yield to some questions?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Senator. I see this is for some respite care facilities, looks like Omaha and Lincoln. Do you know, was there testimony as to how many beds they would provide in each city?
Yes, thank you for the question. In Omaha, the Sienna Francis House has a facility they're going to retrofit, and they're going to start with 25 beds. And I've encouraged them to go to all private rooms so that they get more flexibility on that bed count. And then they intentionally want to expand on up to 35 depending upon demand. In Lincoln, we have talked with several, I think City Center was one, and there has been no commitment specifically to any number of beds. The Sienna Francis House was the initiator of this particular piece, and so we're working with the Lincoln homes to see what they can arrange and come up with.
And is there a priority system? There's going to be more than 24 homeless people in Omaha. Is there a priority system? How do they get admitted?
My assumption is, Senator, that the priority will be virtually on a needs basis, on a first come, first served, because it's intended to be able to take them upon discharge. And of course, that's unpredictable. And so it will be as they come through, and just like every other hospital, when they're full, they're full.
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't this is people being discharged from a hospital?
That's the primary purpose of this, and part of that is because many of these homeless they're diabetic, and so they're on insulin, and they have to have insulin has to be refrigerated. You can't just turn them back out on the street, and a lot of them need rehabilitative care. The reason the hospitals and they're willing to put up some money on this is it's the difference between probably $2,000 a day and $200.
I see. So that's why the word respite is in here. I didn't understand that because that means that they're coming from a hospital.
Yes. Yes, the intent is they will be coming, the vast majority of them is to get them right immediately out of hospitalization rather than filling up a bed, requiring staffing in the hospital and everything.
I see. Okay, thank you. That helps me very much.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I will support LB 905. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens and Senator Reapy. Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 905 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 905 for ENR engrossing. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 61, select file. First of all, Senator, I have ENR amendments.
Senator Slama, you're recognized.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 61 be adopted.
Members, you've heard the motion to adopt the ENR amendments. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. They are adopted.
Mr. President, I have FA 30 from Senator Brandt with a note he wishes to withdraw. In that case, Mr. President, Senator Bostelman would offer FA 233.
Senator Bostelman, you're recognized to open on FA 233.
Thank you, Mr. President. What the floor amendment does is strike the words starting with a comma on or terrestrial fixed wireless technology and end quote there on lines 11 and 12 of page 11. Just to strike those words, I'd ask for your green vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bostelman. Seeing no one else in the queue, you're recognized to close and waive closing on FA 233. Members, the question is the adoption of floor amendment 233. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
40 yeas, no nays on adoption of the floor amendment, Mr. President.
The floor amendment is adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Senator.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 61 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 61 to and R engrossing. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, next bill, select file legislative bill 1104. I have nothing on the bill, Senator.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 1104 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 1104 for ENR engrossing. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, next bill, legislative bill 204. First of all, Senator, I have ENR amendments.
Senator Slama for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 204 be adopted.
Members, you've heard the motion to adopt the ENR amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. They are adopted.
Mr. President, Senator Reapy would move to amend with FA 235.
Senator Reapy, you're recognized to open on the floor amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The floor amendment to ER 56 on LB 204 is a small change that adjusts the expectations for the report produced by DHHS due by December 15th, 2024. Instead of providing only recommendations for how to adjust pharmacy dispensing fees for the independent pharmacies, it would assure that DHHS provides recommendations for all pharmacies participating in the Medicaid assistance program. This does not change the scope of the appropriation, only the scope of the report the legislature will review at the end of the year, detailing how future improvements could be made. With that, I ask for your green light on this amendment to ER 56. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Reapy yield to some questions?
Senator Reapy, would you yield to some questions?
Yes, sir, I will.
We had a bill like this in appropriation, but it was determined to be more appropriate to have it on the floor because of the statutory changes. But I hadn't seen this language adding all other pharmacies. The agreement I had was that only pharmacies with 6 locations or fewer would be included. Now we're adding language that says all other pharmacies. And how does this not expand the bill?
Thank you for the question. The survey is all it amounts to. It doesn't amount to including any fees paid to these additional pharmacies. It just includes them in the study. As long as they are Medicaid assistant participate in the Medicaid assistance program. They want a bigger, we were looking for a bigger, broader look at this thing, maybe for some future session.
All right. Is there $75,000 for a study? Is that what that is?
That is correct.
All right. Does not affect the dispensing fee, just the study. Okay.
That is correct.
I had not noticed that. And I had talked to you about the possibility of just adding an earmark and not needing an A bill for the HHS to use internal funds. And I was in favoring that method, and I've just wondered why you didn't want to do it that way.
Well, I will tell you, I have a concern when add-ons, particularly when you're on select file, come in. They've not had the advantage of going through the hearing. They were not part of the original bill. And so I'm pretty hardcore about adding on cost or changes, significant changes that have never faced the committee, and the committee has not approved it. So I look at this as the bill sponsor. It's not my authority to unilaterally change those things. I feel very strongly about that.
And I had some suggestions that other pharmacies with more locations should be given some extra funds. Are there any extra funds for other pharmacies included in the bill now?
It's limited to those pharmacies that have fewer than 6. And my concern here gets to be too is in the event that you open the opportunity up, you're going to have the next wave and then the following wave. And then pretty soon we're back to every pharmacy, which we determined earlier was not financially viable.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you, Senator Reapy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens and Senator Reapy. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Reapy, you're recognized to close on the floor amendment and waive. Members, the question is the adoption of FA 235. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
28 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on adoption of the amendment.
FA 235 is adopted. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, next amendment, Senator Reapy would move to amend with FA 244.
Senator Reapy, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment adds an emergency clause to LB 204 to assure that the disbursement of appropriated funds is able to start as soon as possible at the beginning of the 2024-2025 fiscal year. With that, I ask for your green light to adopt the emergency clause of LB 204.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. Seeing no one, Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering if Senator Reapy would answer a question or two.
Senator Reapy, would you yield to some questions?
Yes, I will.
Senator Reapy, in your opening, I believe you said that HHS had to write the rules and the regulations for this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So your comment, I believe, was it was supposed to go into effect October 1st to give them time to do that. Would that be accurate?
That's what we were told in terms of negotiating with them.
Okay, so we're putting the emergency clause on so that it becomes law 3 days after the governor signs it. And if it takes those people in HHS till October 1st, how does the emergency clause help us?
I'm sorry, I thought that was a statement, not a question. But
No, that's a question.
okay. We're putting in the emergency clause because in fiscal 2024 and 25 may start before the effective date of LB 204 if passed with an emergency clause, without an emergency clause. So we're trying to coordinate the start dates with the ability to pay this out.
Okay, thank you. So I think this needs to be in place by July 1st so they don't have a disruption. And so if it would take till October 1st, there's going to be a disruption. Then that's all the questions I had, Senator Reapy. So the first year I was here, Senator Reapy and I served on HHS, and we dedicated one hearing to those laws or statutes that had been passed in the last 10 years before that had never been implemented because they hadn't written the rules and the regulations. And so I had several bills in HHS that would have been the opportunity for them to write the regulations and the rules. And back then, Senator Howard was chairman of the committee, and she suggested that I write the rules in the bill so that it would take effect once it was signed, and that's what I did. So I would assume that that's what we should have done here. I'm perplexed as to why the emergency clause will have any effect on when it starts if it's going to take until October 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Erdman and Reapy. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Reapy, you're recognized to close on FA 244 and waive. Members, the question is the adoption of FA 244. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
25 ayes, no nays on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Senator.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 204 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 204 for ENR engrossing. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, select file legislative bill 198. First of all, Senator, there are ENR amendments.
Senator Slama, you're recognized.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 198 be adopted.
Members, you've heard the motion to adopt the ENR amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. They are adopted.
Mr. President, Senator McDonald would move to amend with AM 2624.
Senator McDonald, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Amendment 2624 is an amendment that would add LB 1365 to LB 198. LB 1365 was a bill suggested by NPERS and would accomplish three things. One, the first change is to remove an age restriction on who can attend pre-retirement planning programs with OSERS, the Omaha Public Schools Retirement Plan. Current statute provides that an employee must be 50 years of age to attend the program. The age limitation was removed a couple of years ago with the NPERS system. I would also note that the pre-retirement planning program will transfer to NPERS when the administrative changeover occurs in September of this year. Number two, the second change is to allow the OSERS plan to have an ex officio member on the Public Employees Retirement Board until the OSERS changeover in September. Current statute provides that OSERS will have a full member on the board after the changeover. NPERS seeks to change so that the future OSERS member has a running start when joining the PERB board as a permanent member. The third change is to provide an exception to the state personnel system for the deputies and assistant directors of NPERS agency. This change will allow the directors of NPERS more flexibility in the pay rate for deputies and assistant directors and not be bound by the classified employees pay plan. This exception is not unusual and joins a number of exceptions to personnel system in many agencies. LB 1365 was advanced from the committee to 5-1. I urge you for a green vote on amendment 2624 that adds LB 1365 to LB 198. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Seeing no one else in the queue, you're recognized to close on the amendment and waive. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2624. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
30 yeas, no nays on adoption of AM 2624, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted.
Mr. President, Senator McDonald would move to amend with AM 2694.
Senator McDonald, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendment 2694 is one of those amendments suggested by the reviser, but can't be included in the E&R amendment. The amendment adds a new cross-reference section and makes a few word changes that makes the bill more clear and readable. None of the changes are substantive, and I would urge a green vote.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Seeing no one else in the queue, you're recognized to close and waive. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2694. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
28 ayes, no nays on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Senator.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 198 be advanced to E&R for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 198 for E&R engrossing. All those in favor say aye. All those in favor say, all those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, select file Legislative Bill 304. I have nothing on the bill, Senator.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 304 be advanced to E&R for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 304 for E&R engrossing. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, select file Legislative Bill 938. Senator, I have nothing on the bill.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 938 be advanced to E&R for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 938 for E&R engrossing. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, select file Legislative Bill 644. First of all, Senator, there are E&R amendments.
Senator Slama, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the E&R amendments to LB 644 be adopted.
Members, you've heard the motion to adopt the E&R motion and E&R amendments. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. They are adopted.
Mr. President, Senator McDonald would move to amend with AM 2738.
Senator McDonald, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is what I discussed on general file that I was going to change and worked with Senator Slama, Senator Jacobson, and Senator Clements on. So now we have the amendment becomes the bill. The intent of the legislature is to appropriate $500,000 from the Site and Building Development Fund for fiscal year 24-25 to the department to enter into a one or more contracts to conduct a comprehensive study or studies to identify and evaluate the large commercial and industrial sites in Nebraska that have potential to attract major investment and employment opportunities. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you. Will Senator McKinney yield to a question?
Senator McKinney, would you yield to a question?
Sure. Senator McKinney, it's my understanding you used to do the E&R amendments. I'm just trying to figure out how Slama got stuck with doing them.
I'm not sure. I was wondering where Senator Ballard was, and then I saw Senator Slama doing it. I don't know.
Do you think they just don't want to give you any credit here? I mean, we are just trying to hold you down. I'm so tired of this. Senator McKinney should be doing the E&R amendments.
No, I thought I retired, so I really wasn't in disagreement, but I'm cool with doing it if she doesn't want to do it anymore.
Okay. Thank you, Senator McKinney. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Slama, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, substantively on LB 644, this is the amendment that came as promised that takes care of the bill's fiscal note. I'm grateful to Senator McDonald and Senator Jacobson for their work on this bill. Would Senator McKinney yield for a question?
Senator McKinney, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
So, Senator McKinney, you are junior to me in terms of you were the enrollment and review chairman about, I guess, 4 years after I was, correct?
Yes.
So how old are you, Senator McKinney?
33.
You're 33. Well, I'm 27. Would you mind taking the ENR amendments and motions from here on out?
No, I'm playing. Yeah, sure.
Well, thanks, kiddo. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
All right.
Senators. Senator McDonald, seeing no one else in the queue, you recognized and waive closing on AM 2738. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2738. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
32 ayes, no nays on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
AM 2738 is adopted. Senator McKinney, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to advance LB 644 to ENR for engrossing.
Senators, you've heard the motion to advance LB 644 for ENR engrossing. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 895. I have nothing on the bill, Senator.
Senator McKinney, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to advance LB 895 to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you've heard the motion to advance LB 895 for ENR engrossing. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, say nay. It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 894, introduced by Senator Ibach. It's a bill for not regulating the county sheriffs. Changes law enforcement officer certification requirements for candidates for sheriff as prescribed and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 3rd of this year, referred to the Judiciary Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file pending, Mr. President, when the legislature last left the bill was Legislative Bill 894 itself, as well as the committee amendments and a floor amendment from Senator McKinney, FA 232.
Senator Ibach, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Excuse me, Sen. 1 minute refresh, please.
Okay, I'll be very brief. Thank you, Mr. President. Again, thank you, Speaker Arch, for prioritizing LB 894. It simply requires that a candidate for the office of county sheriff be a certified law enforcement officer when he or she files to run for the office. And currently, anyone can run for the county sheriff's office, regardless of whether or not they are a certified law enforcement officer. And right now, upon election, they have 8 months to obtain that certification. What we're simply doing is asking that they be a law enforcement officer prior to putting their name on the ballot. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wayne, a refresher on the committee amendment, please.
Yes, the committee amendment adds new section 231701 to provide that county sheriff appointed by the county board would also be required to have a law enforcement certification or diploma. This was adopted 8:00 AM 2370 from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator McKinney, you're recognized for a 1 minute refresher on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. FA 232 just states that a sheriff in Lancaster, Douglas, and Sarpy County has to have a 4-year college degree in criminal justice or law enforcement, and that's it. Thank you.
Returning to the queue and seeing no one else in the queue, Senator McKinney, you're recognized to close on FA 232.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just in closing, I just thought, I introduced this portion of this amendment in a bill last year. I believe it was within, I think, LB 284 possibly. It was one of my bills last year, but I think it's an important topic to keep bringing up every year, especially because I still don't feel like we've done enough around law enforcement and holding law enforcement accountable and putting measures in place to make sure we have adequate oversight and accountability when it comes to law enforcement. And I think there is actual reports and studies that have been done that shows that law enforcement officers, whether sheriffs or police that have college degrees or some type of college education, perform a lot better in our communities. And I think that is mostly important, especially in communities like mine. And that's why I brought this amendment. I would ask for your green vote and we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Members, the question is the adoption of FA 232. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
10 ayes, 19 nays, Mr. President, on adoption of the floor amendment.
The floor amendment fails.
Mr. President, Senator Wayne would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 2764.
Senator Wayne, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did not expect, that was me being shocked. If you haven't heard this already, anytime I touch something up here, I get shocked. It's because I'm so electrifying that it just happens that way. Or they're trying to kill me, one or the other. Nevertheless, this bill is a simple bill. It came out of the committee 8-0. I do want to spend some time talking about it. I think it's important. And basically, this had no opposition. Again, it came out 8-0. And what this does is allow for certification of officers who are people who are DACA students. We provide health insurance. We provide them with ability to go to public schools. We apply them with ability to get aid, including state aid and all different types of form. And with this particular bill, this is really simple in the fact that if you are in a DACA status, you can become a law enforcement person or at least receive certification during the time that you still have that. So if anytime your DACA expires, obviously, you would lose your ability to have that certificate. But since you are here and we're providing all these other things for DACA students, it just makes sense that we would allow them to participate in law enforcement. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but again, this came out 8-0. I'm kind of wanting the same respect that we got 8-0 all this morning on consent calendar. 8-0, we had a property tax bill that deal with how we do evaluations, which is considered controversial. Asked a couple questions, sailed right through because we understood. If there's any questions regarding this bill, please get on the mic and ask. I'm here to answer any questions. But the fact of the matter is, this came out 8-0. No opposition testimony. There is a critical shortage of law enforcement individuals or personnel across this state. There is What we've heard about in the hearing was this would help bridge communities. It would help solve our employment, our gap of employment issues that we have in law enforcement. And it would actually put people to work. There are people who are ready to go to work. And so those are the three reasons why I brought this bill, why it was exec on, and why it came out 8-0. If anybody on the committee changed their mind, I would like to hear, since this vote, why they did. If anybody on the committee feels like we should move in a different direction, I have no problem with people changing their vote. Just ask them to explain it. And so that's where it is. It came out 8-0. I asked for a consent calendar. Don't think it was approved because we wasn't on the agenda. But I do expect the same respect out of 8-0 votes that I had watched all this morning. With that, I would ask for a green vote on AM 2764. I'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Mr. Clerk, for an announcement.
Mr. President, the Urban Affairs Committee will have an exec session under the north balcony now, 2:30. Exec session Urban Affairs under the north balcony now.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Returning to the queue, Senator Ibaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Wayne and I have talked about this, and this was a great discussion in committee regarding DACA folks and getting them to work. Although his amendment may achieve, the goal of allowing DACA folks to get to work in industries that they can make a really positive difference in, I agree with putting people to work. Don't get me wrong. However, I think that following up with some conversations, I feel like there might be some legal ramifications down the road that are unclear right now, and possibly even some violations of some immigration laws. I appreciate Senator Wayne bringing this, and I think it was a very good discussion in committee. However, I think that this amendment maybe needs a little bit more work and some direction, and maybe isn't a great fit for my bill, but could be a great fit somewhere else. So with that, I'm happy to speak about it going forward, but with regards to the sheriff bill, I would just assume maybe delay it and find another place for it. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ibaugh. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not support AM 2764. The DACA residents are still non-citizens who we're going to have them be law enforcement officers. And my understanding is that federal law says they're still illegal residents. The only reason I believe that the reason they're being left alone is from a presidential executive order from President Obama, but that the Congress has not declared them legal citizens. They're not, and they're non-citizens. And I think law enforcement officers should be a citizen of the United States when they take an oath to uphold the Constitution. I don't know how you can force a person like that to uphold the Constitution when they're not a citizen. So I oppose LB 2764. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Senator Lowe, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. That came up a little bit quicker than I thought. If Senator Ibaugh would yield to a couple of questions.
Senator Ibaugh, would you yield to some questions?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ibaugh. Can you explain about the DACA situation and how long or how many DACA people we're actually talking about here?
Well, I think one of the issues comes with the DACA certification in that they are only for 2 years. And so that could cause some issues down the road if their designation would happen to expire and possibly for different reasons might not even be renewed. And I just feel like it's a very complex issue and maybe there's too many unknowns.
Okay. And what does this have to do with immigration laws?
Well, I think occasionally we come across issues where we find that immigration laws have been violated, and I think the Supreme Court may have to weigh in on this eventually, just to make sure that this is a valid amendment.
Okay. It seems to me that it's a very complex issue, and maybe too many unknowns with this. But I appreciate your time, Senator Ibaugh, and I appreciate the Judiciary Committee. They presented me with a rose last week on my last testimony before them, so it was very kind of you. I will listen to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Slama, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, colleagues. So this one was a tough one for me. This concept that Senator Wayne is bringing as an amendment to Senator Ibaugh's bill was originally brought to me by a police department in my district. So this bill actually originates from District 1. And the thinking is that in rural law enforcement, we have such a shortage of people being willing to serve. And when it comes to DACA recipients, we're not changing the eligibility requirements. We're not saying that there's a different physical test. We're saying that if you want to put your life on the line to serve and protect our communities, you can do that. Just like I think DACA recipients should be on jury duty, I think they should be able to do this if they want. If they want to walk the thin blue line and protect our communities, I think we should let them work towards that goal. And on the technical side, we're really not dealing with anything that's too complex here. If their DACA status is revoked, away as well goes their law enforcement certification. It's really not that tough. DACA is a program that, yes, came about during the Obama administration. President Trump did not eliminate the DACA program. So it's not like we're dealing with a program that's going to be in flux based on whoever's president. It seems to be pretty well in place now. Regardless of what you think about the policy itself, we could have a full debate about that. But it also came out of Committee 8-0. So from my perspective, if we have men and women willing to serve and put their lives on the line, protecting our communities, especially in rural areas, and they can pass all of the tests, I support it. So this is one of those rare occasions where I'm agreeing with Senator Wayne, and I'd encourage a green vote on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, the bill, I was to Senator Lowe's point, this moved a little faster than I thought it would, so I wasn't quite ready for the introduction, but the bill is LB 918, LB 918. So I'm just going to be transparent because I don't know how else to be. I originally put this on the bill. I talked to the introducer. Everything was of the original underlining bill. Everything was okay. Things have changed since then. I'm just being honest. I don't think we've changed. When I say we, the people who supported this bill have changed, but things have changed. But I wanted people to know what the clear number is. It's LB 118 or 918. 918. It came out 8-0. For those who don't know, I have a 4-4 committee. We hardly have a lot of 8-0 votes. We did in this one. It came out 8-0. What I have told the introducer is I'm not going to work the bill, so nobody saw me come around and tell you to vote on a bill. It's going to be straight up or down. And what I did say, if this tanks the bill, which means takes it to a 33 or a filibuster or a veto, that I will pull the amendment. I don't think I want to vote on it. Let me be clear. But if the vote comes and it's, let's say I get 25, because I think it's the right thing to do. I think last week there was no objection in this body. For whatever reason, people can speculate. Then on select file, I'll take it off. I have no problem doing that. I'm just telling you, at the end of the day, I want to be clear. I asked the introducer before I put this on. Everything was okay. Things have changed. Not between me and the introducer. We're seeing that the floor may be having some issues with it. So the introducer and I are on the same page. The floor may be having some issues with it. If the floor does, I'm not going to take anybody's priority bill or speaker priority bill by doing so. Now, there will be times in this body, let me be clear, I will put an amendment on to kill a bill and make people take a hard vote. This is not that case. This is something I genuinely believe in, that I've already laid out that I was going to put this on there, and here's where we are. I would tell you to vote your conscience. I would tell you to read the committee statement. I would tell you to read the transcript. I will tell you to look at the proponents and opponents. There was no opponents that showed up, and vote your conscience. But I wasn't going to out Senator Slama as the one I talked to about this, because this came from her district, but because I never operate that way, but she got on the mic and talked about it. And since taking over this, there has been a lot of Western, rural, and Southern, I say Southern because there's still parts of Nebraska that is south of Omaha, who have been supportive of this bill. Many emails, many people saying we are supportive of this bill. And quite honestly, this is a great opportunity to exercise our independence and our separation of powers of equal branch of government. So I look forward to the debate. I'm still here to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Vargas, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you very much. Not too much more to say on this. Appreciate Senator Wayne and Senator Slama. Is just a reminder, and we weren't here, but in 2016, there was legislation passed that passed some updated provisions, making sure that DACA were able to be certified for certain occupational licensing. And the rationale behind that was there was a need to expand our workforce. There was a need to make sure that we were doing more to provide pathways for individuals into high-need workforce areas. And I think this is just another example of that. And I know Senator Slama mentioned this, but the need for rural workforce in our law enforcement, this is a common sense solution. This is passed in other states. Same standard is established for that law enforcement officer. There's for every single other law enforcement officer. And I think it's a common sense approach for our workforce development within law enforcement. So I also urge your support of this amendment, and appreciate Senator Slama and Senator Wayne's words, because it's something that we've already done with many other professions for DACA in 2016. And I think it's important for us to make sure that we're also reflecting the needs of our communities and getting more people into the pathway, especially those that are applying, going through the hoops, needed to remain on the DACA program. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Senator Holdcroft, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I support this bill. I am on the Judiciary Committee, and I was one of the 8-0 votes that voted it out. Part of that was based on my experience in the military, where we do allow non-citizens to enlist in the United States military. Sometimes there are restrictions to them on security clearances and the like, but in my younger years, there were a tremendous number of people from the Philippines who found their citizenship through serving 4 years in the United States Navy, and I found them to be among the most loyal and those of integrity. And I think the DACA folks also have the potential for that. I would also point out that this does not guarantee them a position in law enforcement. This just makes them eligible to be hired. And they still need to meet the standards that we expect in our law enforcement personnel. So I will be supporting AM 2764. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Holdcroft. Senator McDonald, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in favor of LB 894, Amendment 2370, and Amendment 2764. It gives me an opportunity to talk about what I had worked on and brought to this floor was the idea of we were the last state on workers' compensation based on authorized workers in this country. And it came up during the pandemic where there was people that were being course, laid off, and their employers were telling them that you are work authorized, you've come to this country, you're paying taxes, and now go down. And since I was, whoever was the employer telling them this was, I've been paying into unemployment insurance for you. When they went down, they found out that we were the last state to harmonize the language with the federal government. And they were not allowed to collect any of those dollars that their employer had paid in on unemployment insurance. Now, they were legally here. They either had a social security number or they had work authorization numbers. So the idea of saying that these people that would participate in this program would be illegal, that's not accurate. Senator Wayne, would you yield to a question?
Senator Wayne, would you yield to some questions?
Yes.
Senator Wayne, is your intent to make sure that all these people that would be eligible, as you stated earlier, to participate in law enforcement and based on our shortages in this country, would be legal citizens based on either work authorized through the federal government?
Yes, they would have to meet all the other requirements. So if you're not eligible to work, you still couldn't get a certificate as law enforcement. So you have to be eligible to work. You have to be a status, in this case, DACA status with the federal government, and eligible to work.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. So I urge you to look at this amendment. Again, I appreciate the committee voting it 8-0 out of committee, but also with the idea of where we are as the state of Nebraska. Again, the last state to harmonize with the feds on the workers' compensation. I think this is a great step forward. It would definitely help our law enforcement agencies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Doran, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. And would Senator Wayne yield us some questions?
Senator Wayne, would you yield to some questions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I talked to you a little bit ago. The bill itself talks about having a law enforcement certificate and completion of the course and all that. But then in the amendment, it talks about DACA, not DACA, excuse me. It talks about the immigrants having a certificate. How do they, and you answered some of it in Senator McDonald's questions, but how do they now, why does our government allow an immigrant to have a certificate?
It would be a state. We're talking about a state's right. So we got federal government rights versus state rights. The state rights, we can choose to expand Medicare. We can choose to give university scholarships with public funds to DACA students. Years ago, we decided as a body to allow DACA individuals to have prenatal health care. So these are all state rights that we can do. And what the individual certificate is for a state right.
So in that respect, then, where or how does it go through our process here as a state? Do they have to apply for this certificate? Do they need training?
So right now, if you were to apply to become a officer, you would go to your local agency, fill out a job application. They would submit all your information to background checks, both State Patrol and FBI federal background check. You would have to pass both of those, be eligible to work in the state of Nebraska, and then you would have to go do your certificate training. So you would still have to go do your law enforcement training and complete all those with satisfactory. We're not changing the process of background check to end. We're just saying somebody else is eligible if they still pass the background check, able to work, and able to pass all their certifications.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those explanations, because that's, when you look at the bill, I guess that's some of the questions I have. Definitely don't sit in judiciary, so we don't get in on some of these discussions or whatever. And some of us that aren't familiar with it, we don't quite understand it. But thank you, Senator Wayne, for that. Thank you all. I'll yield my time.
Thank you, Senators Dorn and Wayne. Senator Clements, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Holdcroft yield to a question?
Senator Holdcroft, would you yield to some questions?
Yes.
You mentioned non-citizens serving in the Navy. As to what rank could they be promoted? Could they be an officer?
Yes, actually. I know, and again, my experience is mostly with the Philippine citizens, and they can rise all the way to rank of E9, certainly, but I am aware of a number of dispersing clerks. Again, dispersing clerks are officers. the possibility of them rising to command at sea is probably pretty limited because they can't hold a security clearance, but there are positions within both in the enlisted ranks and in the officer ranks that do not require a security clearance. So yes, they could conceivably rise as far as they're able.
I'd say so, right, a security clearance would be, thank you, Senator Holdcroft. I thought so. I thought if they're in the military, that they can serve, but a person who is in law enforcement is going to be somebody within a security clearance, and that the non-citizens in the military are not going to be able to have that. So I think that's not really going to change my mind regarding this opposition. So I'm continue to be opposed to AM 2764. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Senator Linehan, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of AM 2764 and 2370 and the Senator Ibach's overarching bill. I understand that there's concerns about DACA, but we've been talking about it for 20 years, and I'm kind of, they come, they get medical care, they get an education, we pay for it. Some of these children don't ever remember being anywhere else but America. So I don't get why this is an issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. See no one else in the queue. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to close on AM 2764.
Thank you. I do want to point out the Nebraska Catholic Conference was one of the people in favor of it. United Cities of Sarpy County was another group in favor of it. Sorry, nobody was against it. There was one letter, I believe, in opposition, I think, somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong. Nevertheless, colleagues, this is interesting for me. And the reason why I'm struggling is because this amendment has been sitting out here for well over the weekend and well over last week. And I didn't start hearing about rumblings until about 10:30 this morning. And so I don't know if it's an issue. It's not an issue with the bill. I think there are some philosophical issues here, and I can respect all those. This is one of these weird spots that I don't know how to get off this ramp. And I'm just speaking transparently right now. I don't know how to get off the ramp because over the weekend, people have changed minds or have decided something else, and nobody informed me until late this morning. And so the question is, really what it comes down to is what Senator Slama said, which is, this wasn't brought by OPD. This was really a rural workforce issue that they were trying to solve some gaps. And in doing so, when you look at the state of Nebraska and what we do for DACA students, this aligns with what we already do. So I would ask for a straight up and down green, red vote. And then whatever happens after that, I'll have to sit down with Senator Ibach and figure it out one way or another. And I have no problem doing that. But the reality is we are trying to solve an issue. Law enforcement brought this idea. It came out 8-0, and it's good policy. And with that, I'll ask for a green vote on AM 2764.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2764. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
36 ayes, 8 nays, Mr. President, on adoption of the amendment.
The amendment is adopted. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Wayne, you're recognized to close on the committee amendment.
Waive.
And waive. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2370. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
39 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on adoption of the committee amendment.
The amendment is adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Ibaugh, you're recognized to close.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. For those of you, just a point of information that I think maybe I was the only one that was here on Saturday for the naturalization ceremony in the rotunda. It's a very, very, very moving experience to see 24 people walk across the stage of every nationality and profess their loyalty and their allegiance to the United States. And this is the second year I've done it, and I kind of get emotional because I know what a privilege it is. They spend 5 years working on their citizenship and their certificate. And I would just encourage anybody the next time we do those that it was Statehood Day, and so it was Nebraska's birthday, but what a great, great way to celebrate it. Anyway, I agreed when Senator Wayne said I'm going to put that amendment on. He kind of sprung it on me, which he does sometimes, but that's okay. And for that exact reason, because it brought up some great floor discussion, and that's what we're sent here to do. I think the concerns, I think your opinions are valid. And again, back to the underlying bill, it's just the sheriff's bill that will require folks running for this office of sheriff in a county to obtain their certification prior to running. So thank you for the discussion. Thank you, Senator Wayne, for your input. And I will appreciate a green vote on the underlying LB 894. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ibaugh. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 894 to E and R initial. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
42 ayes, 2 nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
It is advanced. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Enrollment and Review reports Legislative Bill 829A as correctly engrossed and placed on final reading. Additionally, your Committee on Enrollment and Review reports Legislative Bill 1355 and 137 to select file, both having E and R amendments. Excuse me, Mr. President. Additionally, your Committee on Enrollment and Review reports Legislative Bill 204A, 358A, and 905A to select file. Your Committee on Education, chaired by Senator Merman, reports Legislative Bill 962 and 1014, as well as 1273 to general file. New LR 315, introduced by Senator Wishart. That'll be laid over. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Please proceed to the next item on the agenda.
Mr. President, next item on the agenda, Legislative Bill 906, introduced by Senator Reapy. It's a bill for enacting the child labor laws, changes penalties, provides enforcement powers for the Department of Labor, and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 4th of this year and referred to the Business and Labor Committee. that committee place the bill on general file. There is nothing pending on the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Reapy, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President, and all. I present LB 906. This bill is brought at the request of leadership in the Nebraska Department of Labor and increases the penalty and child labor violations and provides the Department of Labor with the tools necessary to investigate and subpoena related records needed to investigate these violations. LB 906 advanced from the Business and Labor Committee with a 7-0 vote and has no fiscal note. It was made a speaker priority by Senator Arch. Thank you, Senator. Speaker. Recent news highlights concerning instances of child labor prompted our attention. While the era of children in coal mines is past, today children continue to be employed in ways not conducive to their development and in some cases their safety. In Nebraska, we have seen a recent increase in the number of reports and investigations of child labor law violations. LB 906 addresses this by increasing penalties, namely charging violations to a Class 1 misdemeanor from the current Class 2 and promoting active prosecution. A Class 2 misdemeanor carries a maximum penalty of a $1,000 fine and or 6 months jail time, and a Class 1 misdemeanor carries a maximum penalty of a $1,000 fine and or 1 year prison time. 906 also grants the Department of Labor authority to physically impact or inspect workplaces and subpoena records, ensuring direct oversight. This proactive approach strengthens the department's ability to catch violations against children and acts as a significant deterrence for employers seeking to sidestep our laws intended to protect the youngest among us. With that, I ask for your green light on LB 906. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. Senator Kauth, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask Senator Reapy if he would yield to a question.
Senator Reapy, would you yield to some questions?
Yes, I will.
Does this affect the ability of 14 and 15-year-olds to work? Are they still able to do that under the current structure that they have right now?
My understanding is yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. Senator Hansen, you're recognized to speak.
I'm standing here. Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I appreciate Senator Kauth bringing that up. That was just one of the concerns I just wanted to mention about this bill. I am in favor of LB 906. I understand that a lot of this was in relation to some of the issues we saw with meatpacking plants and their hiring of minor workers and working late into the hour and many hours. And so I do respect the fact that Senator Reapy is bringing LB 906 on that behalf. However, I just want to mention that many individuals who work their first job in a grocery store or a restaurant or other retailer, and for them, it's become increasingly difficult to hire 14 and 15-year-olds, from my understanding. And many students want to work before 16, to pay for that car and, pay for gas and save some of that money up for later in life. And I just want to make sure and maybe reiterate the fact that this bill is not intended to punish those in the retail industry and in the grocery industry trying to hire those who are just trying to get started in life. And this is more for those who are fully taking advantage of minor children. So I am in favor of LB 906, and I appreciate everyone's green vote. But just want to reiterate that fact that I think we should try to continue to support our local grocery store and retailers, and even those kids who are trying to get started in life by getting that first job. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Reapy, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is a bill about looking out for the well-being of our young people, and I would encourage a green light. Thank you.
Members, the question is the advancement of LB 906 to E&R initial All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
40 yeas, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
The bill is advanced. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, next item, Legislative Bill 607, introduced by Senator McDonald. It's a bill for inactivating the Public Service Commission. Eliminates a provision relating to an annual grant award amount for the 211 Information Referral Network. State's intent regarding appropriations and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 17th of last year and referred to the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There is no committee amendment. There is an additional amendment, Mr. President.
Senator McDonald, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cleanup bill we passed. There's no fiscal impact to this. Currently, it's a grant process through the Public Service Commission, capped at $950,000. We had increased that. Based on that language, it'll be stricken from the bill going forward, and it's basically a cleanup bill with no fiscal impact.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, Senator McDonald would move to amend LB 607 with AM 2264.
Senator McDonald, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
This is the amendment I was speaking of in my opening. If you look at line 13, 12 and 13, it crosses out beginning January 1st, 2022. The amount of each grant shall be $950,000. It removes that language. As I said, we had appropriated money last year in 23-24 and 24-25. This removes that language from the bill. The amendment becomes the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Returning to the queue, Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator McDonald yield to a question or some questions?
Senator McDonald, will you yield to some questions?
Yes.
Senator McDonald, I see on page 3, section 2 says it's the intent of the legislature to appropriate 1.2 million and then 1.4 million of general funds. Is this coming out of general funds now?
So it's still for the 23-24, 24-25, it's still coming off of the interest off the universal service funds to the general funds. Going forward, it'll be off the general funds.
The bill says that it's $1,275,000 general fund for fiscal year 23-24.
Yes, based on the interest has been moved from the universal service fund interest to the general funds. We had passed this last year in appropriations, put it in the budget at the amount that we're talking about at 1.2 and $1.4 million. The $950,000, the reason we had to remove it because the $950,000 has been already awarded this year for fiscal year 23-24, but they capped it at $950,000. We had moved it up to 1.2 for 23-24, 1.4 for 24-25.
Okay, so it's still, the money is really still public service, interest on the public service, universal service fund, is that correct?
But I just want to be clear that that universal service fund interest is being moved to general fund.
Okay, yes, that does happen. And could you again explain why they're increasing by 490,000 their request for funding?
No, they did not increase by, they were currently at 950,000. What the increase is from 950,000 to 1.2. So when we started this 4 years ago, the 211 service for the state of Nebraska was pretty much banker's hours. We wanted to make sure it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with at least half of the dollars coming from the private sector. They would raise that. We would come in as last dollar as the state of Nebraska. So as the years have gone by, we had it at 950,000. We've moved it up, which is currently in the budget at 1.2, 1.4 for next year. That's why there's no fiscal notice, because we've already voted on it in the budget last year. They felt, the Public Service Commission then felt they were capped at $950,000, which they have awarded for 23-24. They want to go ahead and award the remainder, the $950,000 to the $1.2 million for 23-24, and then up to $1.4 million in 24-25.
Is this being matched by private funds?
Yes.
All right. Would Senator Mosier yield to a question?
Senator Mosier, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator, I see that you voted no on this bill originally. Would you explain why?
Well, when the program started, it was costing a lot less. And as this program has gone on, the costs have greatly increased. And the gist of the hotline is you call up to find out how the state is going, or how to access state services, grants, and or for that matter, federal programs also. But I think most people know how to access those programs. 35% of our budget right now goes to social service programs for various things. And I just didn't know that this was necessarily a necessary program. And, you know, taking the money from the USF fund, that fund was made for high-cost telecom areas where it's too expensive to serve them, and those funds were supposed to be used to offset that. And I didn't think this was a good use.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. Well, I was interpreting this as coming out of general funds now, as long as it's cash funds, which it always has been in the past. I'll thank you, Mr. President. I'll think about that.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo some of the same reasons. I was present, not voting on it, but that Senator Mosier has. I will note for the historical record, I did vote in 2019 to create the 211 fund using the universal service funds, but as a freshman senator and now 6 years in, I've learned a little bit more about the fund, the purpose of the fund, and what it should be utilized for. So I have concerns over using the universal service fund for something that's not part of its original intention, because it is in fact a fee that the citizens pay for a specific use, and that's to serve underserved and unserved areas. So that's why I didn't vote for it. I do appreciate the program. I think it's a valuable program. I do have concerns that we are not only using universal service funds, but the program itself, they refer callers to other programs. And so we aren't funding those programs the same way we're funding the call center. I'm not sure, that's not really something that we can address in this bill, but I just wanted to acknowledge that as an issue. And then my final point to make that's related to this is that we have a lot of different communication hubs, 911, 988, 211, and it would be great if we could look at a way to create greater collaboration and coordination amongst those various communication hubs. I appreciate Senator McDonald bringing this bill. I'll probably remain present, not voting because of the funding source, but I would yield my time to Senator McDonald if he wants to explain the funding source. Senator McDonald, would you like my time?
Thank you, Senator Cavanaugh. Senator McDonald, you have 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. So a couple clarifications based on just the comments. So it's the Universal Service Fund. It's the interest off the Universal Service Fund. It has already been funded. The $950,000, which we're striking that out of the bill, the $950,000. That was capping it. So that $950,000 has been awarded for the 211 in 23-24. What we did as appropriations in my original bill, we moved it up to 1.2 million for 23-24, and for 24-25 up to 1.4 million. Also, this is a helpline. It's east, west, north, south throughout the state. So these are a helpline where you can call 211 24 hours a day. If it's food assistance, shelter, it's a question about your taxes, pretty much anything outside of you have a 911 call where you're having chest pain, your house is on fire, someone's breaking into your home. Of course, you call 911. Outside of that, you call 211. And this is for the whole state of Nebraska, but it's also a assistance line. So then they would direct you to someone as close as they possibly that has donated their time or dollars, which was for United Way of the Midlands last year, a large amount of dollars based on to try to help people and connect them with the right services in their community. So at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, this has been working. You can call 211 for that help. Again, we've already appropriated, so that's why this doesn't have a fiscal note, 1.2 and 1.4 for next year. But my bill, if you look at the language that is crossed out, it's the cap of $950,000, which was awarded this year to 211. What we're asking is for it to be able to move up in the future for the Public Service Commission, whatever appropriations budgets in the future. I'm saying what we've already budgeted for this year was the 1.2 million, 1.4 million for this current budget that we're
1 minute.
That's why it has no fiscal notes. The idea of the need for this, we know the need is here throughout the community because of the number of thousands and thousands of phone calls it gets yearly. The idea of connecting people, we know there's something about Nebraskans, they want to help people. And if we give them that opportunity to help, well, this does. That person that calls 211, again, it's an assistance line, referral line. It connects them with those people that want to help with their time, talent, or treasury. The idea of what this bill is doing, it's just taking the cap off of the $950,000 that was in the original bill, based on, again, having that private sector step up for at least 50% of the cost. We're coming in as last dollar as the state, and we've already approved those dollars in the current budget. No fiscal impact. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Arch, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of AM 2264 and LB 607, but I just have a comment, and I certainly won't be taking the entire time. My comment is this, and that is that over the years, we have attempted to respond to the need for referral sources, to referring to sources, resources that can address the problems and the issues that are faced by our citizens. Right now, we have Department of Health and Human Services. They are funding a helpline, and it's actually contracted through Boys Town, and that helpline is available for referral to services. And we have 211. It is also now being funded and available for referral to services. I think that this probably not something that I'll be introducing this year, but this could certainly be a worthy LR to take a look and see if there are overlap of those services, overlap of the funding, and see if maybe more efficiently we can provide these referral services. And so I would encourage that if someone wants to pick that up. I think that would be a worthwhile study. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Speaker Arch. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. After reviewing the amendment and the bill, the amendment does strike the general fund language, and it still will continue to be a cash fund. And I'm reminded that this is the current budget funded with cash. And so I'm now supportive of the amendment and the bill. The bill really just removes the limitation of $955,000. We gave them $1.2 or $1.4 million, but they can't spend it until we pass this to take off that cap. And so I ask for your green vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator McDonald, you're recognized to close and waive closing. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2264. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
33 ayes, 1 nay on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted. See no one else in the queue. Senator, you're recognized, McDonald, and waves closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 607 to E and R initial. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
31 ayes, 2 nays, Mr. President, on advancement of the bill.
LB 607 is advanced to ENR initial. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, General File Legislative Bill 839, introduced by Senator Lowe. It's a bill for an act relating to the State Racing and Gaming Commission. Changes provisions relating to the appointment, qualifications, and removal of members of the commission. Changes provisions relating to the executive director of the commission. Repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Bill was read for the first time on January 3rd of this year, and bill was read for the first time on January 3rd of this year and referred to the General Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There is nothing currently pending on the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Lowe, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And thank you to Speaker Arch for selecting LB 839 as one of his speaker priority bills this session. LB 839 makes 3 changes that impact the State Racing and Gaming Commission. First, it allows the governor to remove a commissioner with cause. This language would put the Racing and Gaming Commission in line with how the state treats the Liquor Control Commission. These both are important commissions with oversight of industry that brings in significant tax revenue and are areas that deal with vices that the state heavily regulates. It makes sense to me that the Liquor Control Commission and the Racing and Gaming Commission operate in a similar fashion when it comes to their commissioners. I also want to highlight that allowing the governor to remove a commissioner with cause will allow for more oversight of the commission by both the executive branch and the legislative branch. If a commissioner is removed by the governor, the General Affairs Committee, and then the legislature as a whole would be required to vote for or against any replacement appointed by the governor. 839 also looks at changes on how the executive director of the Racing and Gaming Commission is selected. Currently, this position is simply selected by the commissioner. LB 839 changes that by maintaining the commission selection, but also now requires that the governor signs off on the hire. Lastly, 839 requires that the executive director of the Racing and Gaming Commission does not engage in any other profession or work for any other business. This requirement is intended to ensure the executive director is a full-time employee, focusing on his or her full attention to this critically important position. Colleagues, I have greater oversight. Having greater oversight of the Racing and Gaming Commission is a no-brainer. This is especially true given the numerous stories and articles that have come out this year in regards to the commission and some questionable decisions that they have made. LB 839 does not guarantee any commissioner will be removed, but it does allow for a stronger oversight and pathway to improving the commission if grave mistakes continue to happen. LB 839 was voted out of committee on a 6-1 vote with 1 absent. This was one of those strange bills that had no proponent or opponent or neutral testifying. With that, I would encourage you to vote yes.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I let Senator Lowe know that I was still kind of percolating and digesting about whether or not I was going to vote for this measure today, and I'm still kind of in that boat. I appreciate and understand that as gaming has expanded in Nebraska, primarily due to affirmative and positive votes by the people through our second house initiatives of second house efforts like the initiative, that there may have been some growing pains, may be some growing pains in regards to the Gaming Commission. But I am generally concerned, and not because of politics or personality, about ceding too much power needlessly to the executive branch and to the governor in particular, and moving away from the current structure, which allows for more dynamic cooperation and independence in this critical agency. So I'm going to probably be present, not voting today on general file, think a little bit more about the measure from general to select, and just wanted to put that note in the record and thank Senator Lowe for his leadership and friendship and open-mindedness in approaching this bill and this conversation with me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Lowe, you're recognized to close and waive. Members, the question is advancing LB 839 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
39 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
The bill advances. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, General File Legislative Bill 834, introduced by Senator Blood. It's a bill for an act relating to the Dentistry Practice Act. Establishes requirements for a resident license, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 3rd of this year and referred to the Health and Human Services Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Blood, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President, fellow senators, friends all. Thank you for the opportunity to bring forward LB 834, establishing the dental residence license in Nebraska. And thank you to Speaker Arch for making this one of his priority bills. First, I want to highlight that this bill does not change the licensure requirements for dental residents from how it stands today. It merely streamlines the process for obtaining such a license. Nebraska requires dental residents to be licensed. Medicaid also requires dental residents to be Medicaid credentialed so that claims can be filed under individual residents rather than faculty. I share that fact because the UNMC dental residency program is the primary workforce providing treatment for Medicaid patients and special needs patients in Nebraska. Historically, the process to obtain a license as a dental resident was tied statutorily to Nebraska's general dentist license requirements, literally each statute referencing the other. Over the course of the last 6 months, there has been mutual recognition by stakeholders in the dental community about the need to separate these two statutes to accommodate accepting multiple clinical licensure exams when it comes to licensing dental residents. This process strengthens the pool of dental residents training in Nebraska, grows the pipeline for the dental workforce, and ensures that we can continue to provide excellent dental care to Nebraska residents. Also in this bill, I want to mention the ability for a dental resident license to establish clinical examination competency for purposes of general licensure. In conversations among dental stakeholders, this was seen as a positive addition to encourage more dental residents to remain and practice in Nebraska after their service in a residency program. Finally, the bill encourages continued dialogue between the colleges of dentistry in Nebraska at UNMC and Creighton and with the Nebraska Board of Dentistry by formalizing the expectation that the colleges will provide input to the board annually. In Nebraska, I believe we should look to remove barriers to bring in potential additions to our struggling workforce. This is a simple and technical way to reduce licensure barriers for some potential future dentists in our state. I want to note that LB 834 advanced 7-0 out of the Health and Human Services Committee with 0 opposition in person. Proponents in the hearing included a representative from the UNMC Dental School and the Nebraska Dental Association, with online proponents from the Creighton Dental School and Nebraska Board of Dentistry. Please make note, there is no fiscal note. Thank you again for your time today, and I ask that you please vote green and move this much-needed bill forward.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Hansen, you're recognized on the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. The standing committee amendment is a white copy amendment that adds language under section 2 for exam requirements. More specifically, it adds an additional requirement that the applicant must pass a jurisprudence examination based on Nebraska law and administrative rules and regulations governing the practice of dentistry and dental hygiene. The addition is needed in order to make consistent the exam requirements for a resident license and a license to practice dentistry under subsection 1 of Nebraska Revised Statute 38-1117. As amended, LB 834 was voted out of committee unanimously, and I would urge the body to adopt AM 2428 and advance LB 834. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Hansen, you're recognized and waived, closing on AM 2428. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2428. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
30 yeas, no nays on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, I have AM 2141 from Senator Blood with a note that she would withdraw that amendment.
Without objection, it is withdrawn. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Blood, you're recognized to close and waive. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 834 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
32 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
It is advanced E&R initial. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, next bill, General File Legislative Bill 1313, introduced by Senator Dover. This bill for relating to health benefit plans, exempt certain health benefit plans from insurance regulation. Bill was read for the first time on January 17th of this year and referred to the Agriculture Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments.
Senator Dover, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, colleagues. I rise to introduce LB 1313 for your consideration. LB 1313 is about providing an affordable health care benefit plan. It allows nonprofit agricultural membership organizations to offer non-insurance, high-quality, affordable health care benefit plans to their members. I want to highlight two key points: non-insurance and affordability. Their plan will be offered, The plan will be offered are non-insurance plans, however, similar to insurance. They will offer coverage that would include office visits, hospitalizations, preventive care, emergency room services, maternity care, as well as coverage for mental health and substance abuse. The plans would be fully underwritten and individually rated. These plans would also be affordable. Plans similar to what will be offered to this bill are already available through several faith-based organizations. What we are doing through LB 1313 is offering another option. I have a son-in-law who farms by Pierce, Nebraska. My daughter works in our company, and they have a 2- and 3-year-old. They are challenged to find affordable health care coverage for their farming family of 4. This plan will provide them and many families like them a family-friendly health care alternative. There's another benefit to families. In many cases across Nebraska, one spouse has to work for an employer who provides health insurance so that their entire family has coverage. In some cases, this is the sole reason for the employment. This affordable health care option frees the spouse to choose to be home or to work, to raise a family, or to follow their dreams in a job of their own choosing. Simply put, it provides them with the freedom to choose. The goal of LB 1313 is simple, high-quality, affordable health care option for those who want it. I'm excited about what the bill has to offer and look forward to providing this option to Nebraskans. LB 1313 was voted out of committee unanimously with 1 member absent. It has no opposition at the hearing. With that, I appreciate your green vote on LB 1313. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dover. Seeing no one else in the queue, you're recognized to close and waive closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 1313 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
33 ayes, no nays in advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
It is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, General File Legislative Bill 1215, introduced by Senator Hansen. It's a bill for an act relating to the Department of Health and Human Services. Changes provisions relating to fees, communicable diseases, rehabilitation beds, and acute care beds. Harmonized provisions, repeals original section, outright repeals several sections in Chapter 71. Bill was read for the first time on January 16th of this year and referred to the Health and Human Services Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Hansen, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Before I go into my opening on LB 1215, I would like to explain the HHS committee package. Last year, I introduced the interim study LR 234 to examine the effectiveness of the state of Nebraska's response to the COVID pandemic. After several meetings with the state agencies and health organizations, I discovered many rules and mandates that were removed during the pandemic that were not necessary to begin with. One of my recommendations from LR 234 report was to loosen up the rules and regulations for health professionals so they could do their job more effectively. As we dug into this further, I asked my staff to contact health organizations and state agencies to see how we could eliminate red tape for health professions and make their jobs easier. This package, as I will explain in more detail when I open on the committee amendment, cuts out the red tape and makes state agencies and health organizations able to do their jobs more effectively. I will now open on the original green copy of LB 1215. I introduced LB 1215 on behalf of DHHS. The bill requires that licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, and advanced practice registered nurses register contact information with a national electronic database at no cost. The registration will allow the nurses to receive electronic notices, renewal notices, updated statuses, and provide more up-to-date nursing workforce data collection to the department. This would be accomplished during the license renewal process for existing licensed professionals and upon initial licensure for future applications. Second, it removes a requirement that DHHS collect a fee for any applicant licensee requesting an informal conference with a peer review organization of a healthcare facility to cover the cost expense if removed. Third, tuberculosis patients can be committed to other locations other than hospitals. Expenses incurred in the care, maintenance, and treatment of tuberculosis patients shall be paid from state funds for the purpose of entering into agreements to provide the care, this care and is not limited to agreements on qualified healthcare facilities. DHHS shall adopt and promulgate rules and regulations relating to the care, maintenance, and treatment of tuberculosis patients and not be limited to contracts with hospitals and healthcare facilities. Also, this bill removes the healthcare facility on either an inpatient or an outpatient basis from the transportation of tuberculosis patients statute. Fourth, the certificate of need requirement for rehabilitation beds in hospitals is removed. This provision will be removed by the committee amendment. I will speak on this one open on the committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. As stated, there is a committee amendment. Senator Hansen, you're recognized to open.
Thank you. Standing Committee Amendment AM 2549 amends LB 1215, 1181, and 1171, and adds the original green copies of LB 1009, 1173, 1138, and 896. The amended versions of LB 1215 removes the repeal of the certificate of need requirement for rehabilitation beds in hospitals. This is a portion of the bill that was kind of creating, the only portion really of this whole committee package that created a little bit of heartburn among the committee and others, so we just decided to remove that portion. LB 1181, introduced by Senator Ballard, changes provisions to the Pharmacy Practice Act, Uniform Controlled Substances Act, and Public Health and Welfare statutes relating to drugs. Specifically, this bill changes inventory and dosage requirements for controlled substances, self-inspection forms used by pharmacies, pharmacy intern age requirements, pharmacy technician registration requirements relating to drug-related crimes, and labeling requirements involving legend drugs which are not controlled substances. The amended version of LB 1181 changes the pharmacist intern age requirement from 17 to 18. LB 1171, introduced by Senator Hardin, adds an exception to pharmacy verification requirements. Verification shall occur by a pharmacist on duty in the facility, except that verification may occur by means of a real-time audiovisual communication system. The amended versions of LB 1171 retains the original language from the bill, but adds the emergency clause. And LB 1009 allows a person who has failed the third barber examination to take it again. Statutory references relating to barber schools, revocations and suspensions, violations of the Act, Board of Barbers Examiners, and rules and regulations are moved and replaced with the Barber Act. 1173, introduced by Senator Reapy, provides for the use of abstracts of death and changes death certificate requirements. This bill defines abstracts of death in Vital Statistics Act as a certified document that summarizes the facts of death, including but not limited to the name of a descendant, the date of death, and the place of death. An abstract of death does not include signatures. This bill changes the death certificate form for veterans and the U.S. Armed Forces by removing the space for a period of service. LB 1138, introduced by Senator Reapy, allows a prescriber who issues less than 50 prescriptions a year to not have to use electronic prescription technology. LB 896, introduced by Senator Ballard, removes the requirement that when a telehealth patient gives verbal consent, then assigned a statement must be collected within 10 days. And I ask for your vote on the committee amendment, and we'd be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. But I believe maybe some of the introducers might get up and talk about it a little bit if anybody has any questions as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Reapy, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Chair Senator Hansen of the HHS Committee. Senator Hansen mentioned, and I will reiterate just briefly here, LB 1138, which was my bill, removes the requirement for low-volume prescribers, namely dentists, to have expensive controlled substance reporting software. During the hearing, we heard that this software cost around $700 to $1,000 per year. If you're a low-volume prescriber who only writes 5 to 10 controlled scripts per year, this cost is obviously substantial. The cost of LB 1138, the cutoff is 50 or fewer prescriptions per year. LB 1138 was brought to me by the Nebraska Dental Association. The second one that was mentioned and noted by Senator Hansen was LB 1137, which allows DHHS to issue death abstracts before the full death certificate is issued, which can sometimes take up to a month or so. This allows families and funeral directors to expedite the legal processes that occur after death. LB 1173 was brought to me by the Nebraska Funeral Directors Association. Thank you again, Senator Hansen, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. Senator Hardin, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to just encourage your vote for this amendment and the underlying bill. 1171 is my bill. In plain language, what that allows a pharmaceutical organization to do, or a pharmacy to do, is to have a group of pharmacists at work in a place where they can simply do their fulfilling of the prescriptions. In other words, they're not running back and forth from the counter, answering questions, and back to filling the scripts. And so it's just a smoother operation in terms of how those prescriptions come together, end up in a bag, and eventually end up in your pocket, because there's a lot of chaos that can go on inside of any pharmaceutical or pharmacy situation. Also want to point out that this bill has no fiscal note. And I would like to say that Senator Clements gave me a gold star as chair of appropriations because I introduced 8 bills this year. None of those 8 have a fiscal note. I would just like to add that. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hardin. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Hansen, you're recognized and to close and waive closing on AM 2549. Members, the question is the adoption of. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
37 ayes, no nays, on adoption of the committee amendment, Mr. President.
Seeing no one, the amendment is adopted. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Hansen, you're recognized to waive and to close and waive closing on LB 1215. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 1215 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
40 ayes, no nays, on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
It is advanced. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, General File Legislative Bill 1200, introduced by Senator Mosier. It's a bill for an act relating to motor vehicles, amends a plethora of statutory sections, adopts updates to the federal law and updates certain federal references, changes provisions relating to certificates of title under the Nebraska Probate Code, delivery of certain notifications relating to operators' licenses, the Motor Vehicle Certificate of Title Act, the Motor Vehicle Registration Act, the Motor Vehicle Operators License Act, and the Nebraska Rules of the Road. Changes certain civilian penalties, eliminates obsolete provisions, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Bill was read for the first time on January 16th of this year and referred to the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with a committee amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Mosher, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues and fellow Nebraskans. Today I present LB 1200, the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee priority bill for this session. It came out of committee on an 8-0 vote and also has an amendment AM 2508.
1200 was on behalf of the Nebraska Department of Motor Vehicles and the Nebraska State Patrol. It's an annual update and harmonization bill which updates statutory references to federal regulations in operation as of January 1st, 2024. The bill also harmonizes and eliminates obsolete language. Specifically, the bill contains the following provisions. Sections of the bill update the Nebraska revised statutes to conform with federal regulations in effect as of January 1st, 2024. The updated reference keeps Nebraska in compliance with federal law to ensure Nebraska does not lose millions of dollars in federal highway funds. The bill makes changes in some of the provisions regarding restricted driver's licenses and issuing driver's licenses to persons turning 21 years of age. The bill pushes up the date 1 year earlier to July 1st, 2024 to reduce the per ton registration fee for commercial vehicles. At the request of the Nebraska Trucking Association, provisions of the bill allow commercial trucks with camera systems approved by the Federal Motor Carrier Administration to operate without mirrors. The bill also cleans up obsolete language provisions referencing commercial learner's permits and seasonal permits, both of which are no longer authorized by the state. I ask you to vote green on LB 1200 and AM 2508 and pass them on to select file.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. As stated, there is a committee amendment. Senator Mosier, you're authorized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. 1200 is the annual motor vehicle update bill for transportation and telecommunications. The bill references federal law and clarifies vehicle titling and registration statutes and conforms Nebraska law relating to commercial driver's licenses to applicable requirements established by the federal government. It also harmonizes and removes obsolete statutes, strikes original section 50 of the bill. LB 1200 allows commercial trucks with rear view camera systems approved by the federal government to operate on Nebraska roads. Original section 50 was inadvertently included in the bill and was not required to implement the federal required camera authority. Additionally, the committee amendment adds provisions from 5 other bills. The committee amendment adds LB 226, which is Senator Brandt's bill to amend the process for construction manager general contractor contracts. Section 1 from the bill is added and provides that the qualification and proposal receipt process may be combined into a single-step process by a contracting agency. LB 891 is Senator Bozin's bill to amend the Motor Vehicle Industry Licensing Act by defining a manufacturer as anyone who manufactures or assembles motor vehicles, regardless if they have franchised dealers. Also, the amendment clarifies that a manufacturer may not own or operate a service facility to perform warranty or non-warranty work on vehicles they manufacture unless they manufacture and distribute electrical vehicles and have never been a franchisor in Nebraska. LB 900 is Senator Brandt's bill that increases the maximum length of straight trucks operating in Nebraska from 40 to 45 feet. LB 929, introduced by Senator Frederickson, pertain to the 988 suicide and crisis hotline administered by the Department of Health and Human Services, that they should have the capability to connect and communicate with the 911 service system. The Public Service Commission is to cooperate and coordinate with DHHS and adopt standards governing training, support, and quality assurance. Finally, the committee amendment adds Senator DeKay's bill, LB 966. It does 2 things. It clarifies the meaning of traffic control signals displaying a flashing yellow arrow or a steady red arrow
A flashing yellow arrow allows the movement indicated after yielding, and a steady red arrow requires a complete stop until an indication to proceed is displayed. Second, the amendment provides that the variable motor fuel tax may be set in increments of 0.01% instead of increments in 0.1%. Mr. President, I'd be glad to answer any questions and would ask for the adoption of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee amendment to LB 1200. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. Senator Frederickson, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Nebraskans. I rise today in support of both AM 2508 as well as the underlying bill, LB 1200. Want to just share my gratitude to Chair Moser for the Transportation Telecommunications Committee, as well as all the staff in that committee for helping us put together, I think, what is a very thoughtful package. I wanted to just rise because one of the bills in this includes LB 929, which is a bill of mine within this package. And this is a bill that is going to help ensure that Nebraskans undergoing a mental health crisis are connected to mental health professionals through the 988 crisis line as intended. So in 2020, Congress enacted the Federal National Suicide Hotline Designation Act, which establishes 988 as a universal 3-digit number for the purposes of national suicide prevention and mental health crises hotline. Boys Town serves as the Nebraska call center for the 988 line, and they have done truly a really fantastic job. We've actually gotten feedback on the federal level that says Nebraska is a true leader with our 988 implementation. So that's something we should all be very proud of. Currently, this was something I learned during an interim study of mine. 988 operators can use 911. So if an individual calls into 988 and 911 services are needed, 988 is able to transfer to 911. However, 911 is not able to do that in reverse. So if someone calls into 911 and a 988 operator is the more appropriate intervention, that is not currently happening. So LB 929, which was included in the committee amendment here, will allow for both of these resources to interact with each other so that Nebraskans who are reaching out in crisis are able to get the most appropriate care that they need. So again, I rise in support of both AM 2508 and LB 1200 and encourage a green vote on both. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Frederickson. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator Boslin yield to a question?
Senator Boslin, would you yield to some questions?
Yes.
Yes, just going to your part of the bill, I noticed that there was some opposition to Self people and then two individuals representing Tesla. Can you explain kind of if that got worked out or not?
Yes, thank you. So the amendment to my original bill, which was 891, did fix the language so that Tesla and the new car dealers and manufacturers were, it was language that they drafted together, brought to me, and was agreed upon by the members of the committee, but ultimately alleviated the concern. Initially, there was an issue that the language in 891 would require the closure of a newly opened Tesla service center, specifically here in Lincoln. And so given that that wasn't my intention, nor the intention of the individuals who brought me the bill, we worked out the language in the amendment. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so are they in favor of this bill or neutral?
They're in favor of this bill as amended.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. See no one else in the queue. Senator Moser, you're recognized to close on the committee amendment and waive. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2508. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
41 ayes, no nays on adoption of the committee amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted. See no one else in the queue. Senator Mosier, you're recognized to close on the bill. Waive closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 1200 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
42 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
The bill is advanced. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, General File Legislative Bill 904, introduced by Senator DeBoer. This bill for inoculating child care changes child care reimbursement rates and repeals the original section. Bill is read for the first time on January 4th of this year and referred to the Health and Human Services Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There is a committee amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator DeBoer, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good day, colleagues. I'm proud to stand before you today to introduce the Planning Committee's priority bill, LB 904. So before I get to the specifics of that bill, I wanted to discuss how we got here. You may recall that last year I sent a survey to members of this body asking what issues deserved the Planning Committee's focus. And the issues that were sort of selected were the demographic trends in Nebraska, childcare, housing, and water quality issues. This interim, we held many meetings where we discussed those issues. And ultimately, we decided that we would focus on childcare. Many of you introduced various bills dealing with childcare, and the governor even made it a priority for his administration. So the Planning Committee has identified a package of childcare bills aimed to improve access to childcare from a number of different angles. LB 904, which is my bill, LB 1178 by Senator Wishart on intergenerational care facilities, and LB 1416, which is the Child Care Capacity Building and Workforce Act, introduced by Senator Bostar at the request of the governor regarding the Child Care Capacity Building and Workforce Act. LB 904 and 1178 were both referred to the Health and Human Services Committee and were advanced together in AM 2734 on a 7-0 vote. So that's the committee amendment, which Senator Hansen will introduce in just a minute. So that will include the first two of those bills which we are putting together. Thank you to the HHS committee members for your care and passion about developing Nebraska's child care. LB 1416, however, was introduced to, or was referred to the Banking, Insurance, and Commerce Committee. And I would ask for your support to amend it onto this bill, which will be brought as a subsequent amendment to the committee amendment by Senator Bostar. So I'm going to let those senators introduce their bills, but first I'll say, let me focus on LB 904, which is my bill, which is the vehicle for the Planning Committee package. LB 904, it turns out, is kind of a simple bill. State statute currently authorizes the Department of Health and Human Services to use just one method to determine the child care subsidy reimbursement rates. That one method is the market rate survey. Under that method, there are two markets in Nebraska. One market is Dakota, Douglas, Lancaster, and Sarpy counties, and the other market is every other county in Nebraska. So the market rate survey may not have the flexibility to take into consideration the various situations across the state. LB 904 allows the department to use a different model if they want to. There are at least two models that are federally approved that are federally approved for child care subsidy, but the state could also create its own model and then get it approved by the federal government. Currently, the department has no ability to use any model but the market rate model, and LB 904 gives the department the discretion. The second change in LB 904 is to codify what we included in our budget to provide reimbursement for providers at the 75th percentile of the market rate as determined by the department, if the department chooses to stay with that model. So that's the LB 904 portion of the bill. And then afterwards, you will hear the committee amendment, which adds in Senator Wishart's portion. And then after that, there will be another amendment to the committee amendment, which will add in Senator Bostar's. It's a little unusual, the planning committee, because we take a broader approach to issues than particular subject matter committees. That's why we're having to do it this way. So I would appreciate your support on all of the amendments, and I would appreciate your support on the original bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. As mentioned, there's a committee amendment. Senator Hansen, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. The Standing Committee Amendment AM 2734 is a white copy amendment that amends provisions of LB 1178 into LB 904. LB 1178, introduced by Senator Wishart, establishes the Intergenerational Care Facility Incentive Grant Program. The program will award grants to nursing facilities for one-time startup costs for capital improvements to provide child care and nursing facilities. The grant program will be administered by the Department of Health and Human Services with a maximum of $100,000 per grant, a limit of 1 grant per facility, and a total of $300,000 in grants awarded. As amended, LB 904 was voted out of committee unanimously, and I would urge the body for their green vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Wishart would move to amend with AM 2775.
Senator Wishart, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. AM 2775 to Committee Amendment 2734 simply updates the funding source for my bill 1178, which was generously included in the Planning Committee priority bill. To avoid a general fund impact for this one-time pilot program cost of $300,000, we will be utilizing the Medicaid Managed Care Excess Profit Fund. And I want to thank the Planning Committee, Chair DeBoer and Chairman Hansen for working with me to include this important legislation I've been working on since 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wishart. Returning to the queue, Senator Hansen, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I just want to verify with everybody that Senator Wishart's AM 2775 is a friendly amendment to Health and Human Services Committee amendment. I appreciate all the work that she's done with this kind of revolutionary program, I guess you would say, about kind of intermingling two important healthcare aspects together, not just save costs for the taxpayer, but also to improve the lives, I think, of all of those involved. So I would encourage your green vote on AM 2775 and the amendment and the underlying bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no one else in the queue, you're recognized to close on AM 2775. Excuse me, Senator Wishart, and waves. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2775. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
40 yeas, no nays on adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
It is advanced.
Mr. President, concerning LB 904, Senator Bostar would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 2858.
Senator Bostar, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And good afternoon, colleagues. AM 2858 amends the committee amendment to include LB 1416, as was previously mentioned. That's a bill I introduced at the request of Governor Pillen that would create dual programs through the Department of Economic Development designed to increase the number of childcare providers, support the childcare workforce, and provide Nebraska families with reliable, accessible, high-quality childcare solutions. As part of the Governor's Task Force on Workforce Challenges, public and private stakeholders convened to discuss the childcare challenges and potential solutions. The group discussed the need to find innovative ideas that would approach this problem through a new lens. This amendment does just that. This proposal utilizes the private sector and provides communities the opportunity to decide how best to approach their unique childcare needs. AM 2858 does this by creating two separate workforce initiatives to be administered by the Department of Economic Development. First, the amendment creates the Child Care Capacity Building and Workforce Grant Program. The program would establish a framework for providing funds to develop child care capacity in areas of greatest need to serve children ages 0 to 3 and to support the child care workforce. To qualify as an eligible recipient for this program, any city, village, county nonprofit organization deemed appropriate by the department must provide a 1-to-1 match for the grant requested. The match can be monetary or in-kind donation. Applications will be prioritized based on how they will use the funding. For instance, those that want to support the child care workforce or create a new program in a county with no licensed child care access would be given priority. Second, AM 2858 creates the Family Child Care Home Grant Program. As part of this grant program, the department will have the flexibility to facilitate the creation of microcenters, a form of care that uses existing space from a business, church, or school to care for up to 12 children. These microcenters would require 2 staff and rely on support from regional facilitator hubs to provide administrative and technical support. These facilitator hubs work to lessen the administrative burden and financial overhead on child care providers so that providers can focus on the most important work of all, which is caring for and educating Nebraska's children. I want to extend my thanks to the many stakeholders that worked to support this proposal. The original legislation was supported in committee by Governor Pillen's Policy Research Office, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, the Nebraska Catholic Conference, the Platt Institute, the Nebraska Farm Bureau, the Nebraska Cattlemen, First Five Nebraska, Cedars Youth Services, the Orchard Child Development Center, the Nebraska Independent Community Bankers, the Nebraska Nurses Association, and Hoppy Development. I especially want to thank Governor Pillen for his work to bring early child education and child care solutions to every family in Nebraska. I believe that the diverse list of supporters illustrate well what an absolutely critical issue this is to the economic and social well-being of the state of Nebraska. The legislation had no opposition and advanced from committee unanimously. Our economy depends on quality, affordable child care programs to support our working parents. Nebraska job creators are hurting for a workforce to grow our state's economy, and Nebraska parents are hurting for reliable, high-quality child care options to support their families. AM 2858 provides relief to both by providing flexible grant programs so communities can address their unique child care needs in the ways that best fit their unique requirements. Thank you for your consideration, and I would encourage your support of AM 2858, AM 2734, and LB 904. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Senator Brandt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Bostar answer a question, please?
Senator Bostar, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator Bostar, I was just looking at the fiscal note on this, and I guess I'm a little confused. On top, it shows there is not a fiscal note. On the bottom, there's about $400,000 of fiscal. Where is the money coming from to fund this program?
So it's $5 million one-time money going into the fund.
From who?
From the state.
From the general fund?
I believe it was written for that.
So why isn't there a fiscal note?
Because that was part of it was amended when the bill was introduced. Everyone that was working on the legislation wasn't sure yet where that number should land. Ultimately, the governor's office decided on $5 million to put into the fund as one-time money. And so that's what we amended it to do. And so that's what's in the bill in the form in AM 2858.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brandt and Senator Bostar. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Well, Senator Bostar, yield to a question.
Senator Bostar, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
What was your bill number?
1416.
1416 or 1460?
1416.
And you said there was no opposition?
Correct.
Can you give me a brief refresher on what it does?
Yes. So the legislation would create two programs. One is the Child Care Capacity Building and Workforce Grant Program. That's essentially a grant program administered by DED that would require a one-to-one match from communities to receive the money to support child care access development and to support child care workforce. And they would have the ability to prioritize which grants, I guess, get taken up first based on the areas of need. The second is the Family Child Care Home Grant Program, which would allow the creation of micro centers, which are child care centers that can care for up to 12 children, and they can be placed in residential and non-residential settings. And they would be administration of them would be supported through administrative hubs that would be also administered by DED.
Thank you. That right there is going to cause me to vote no on this bill. DED has a hard time right now in the last 2 years moving out dollars for North and South Omaha. I think giving them another grant program is a problem. So I don't think we should give DED any more grant programs, in particular one that doesn't deal with childcare. Why DED and why not HHS that are already dealing with these same childcare facilities?
I'm sorry, you're asking me why is the program going through DED and not HHS?
Correct.
This bill came out of the governor's, that working group that was created over the interim to work on workforce challenges. There was a subgroup that worked on childcare in particular. And this legislation came out of that. So to some extent, I don't know the full answer to your question of why DED was selected over HHS. That wasn't my decision, and it came out of that group.
Thank you, Senator Bostard. I'm gonna just be present, not voting on this one. I'm gonna wait. I will say that if DED or we can't figure out how to move this somewhere else, I would probably take it the distance just because it requires DED. That's just, it's no shy that I got issues right now with how that organization's running or how that agency's running. And I'm also confused on how much we're doing for childcare. We got 640 funds or 860 funds. We have plenty of pre-K. I'm just a little confused on how much money we're putting into childcare. Not saying it's not needed. Got to figure out how come we can focus it a little bit better and focus it a little directly to where we're trying to go. It just kind of seems like it's a shotgun approach. And at least for my community, that hasn't worked well and changed anything. So thank you, Senator Bostard. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bostard, would you yield to a question?
Senator Bostard, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm asking you this because not only is it your bill, but also you are on the exec board. And just looking this over, why was this reference to banking?
So the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee takes DED in its portfolio. So for example, the confirmation of the DED director went to banking.
Sure.
This is a DED program.
Okay, just in looking it over and hearing Senator Wayne's comments, I was like, this seems like it would have come to our HHS normally, but
that's a good question.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That was my only question. I had another thought and I lost it, so I will yield the remainder of my time to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cavanaugh. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I am okay. Actually, I'm going to vote for this. Here's what's going to happen. This is a bill that is in banking, and we're putting it to a bill that was in HHS. I am going to vote for this because if we do that, I'm doing that to all my bills throughout the rest of the session. If we are going to move bills from committees to another bill, I'm all in. I am all in. I was told we weren't going to do that this year, but if we're going to do that, I am all in. And you better believe I'm not going to come up and ask everybody about whether it's friendly or not. If we are going to start doing that, I'm okay with it. But I want to be clear, and I'm telling everybody I'm being clear about this. If this is in banking, which is what I'm looking at this amendment, and we're putting it in a bill in HHS, I'm all in. But understand what that means for the rest of this year and the rest of this body. I'm all in. This is not what we were told we weren't going to do that, and we are doing that. Yield the rest of my time to Senator Meyer.
And waived. Senator DeBoer, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I'll speak to the issue that Senator Wayne brought up. This is kind of a unique situation because this is the Planning Committee's priority bill. The Planning Committee does not take subject matter jurisdiction or at least original subject matter jurisdiction of any bills. So we do not hear bills, primarily because we do most of our work during the interim. So when we create a Planning Committee priority package, just like any of your other committees, we do so from the perspective of looking at an issue from a large 400-foot, 5,000-foot, whatever you want to say, perspective, looking down at the issue and seeing how the issue can be planned for from a variety of different perspectives. That, of course, necessarily means that there might be bills from various jurisdictions that would come together to make one overarching way of supporting the bill. And that is why I said we could have a variety of different bills come together in this Planning Committee package. It's simply to look at how can we address the issue of childcare from a number of different perspectives. That was, again, one of these issues that you all identified last year as something you wanted us to look at. We spent a number of really very good days of discussion about this issue over the summer with a wide swath of senators who serve on the Planning Committee. And then for this very particular instance of the Planning Committee priority bill, we're putting together this multifaceted bill that's going to address childcare from a number of different areas. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. See no one else in the queue, Senator. Speaker Arch, you're recognized for an announcement.
Mr. President, I would ask that we pass over LB 904 at this point and continue our discussions regarding the language and the amendments and so forth, and that we move to LB 1204 at this point.
Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, concerning the agenda, next item, Legislative Bill 1204 by Senator John Kavanaugh. It's a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Liquor Control Act. Authorizes a holder of a micro distillery license and a holder of a manufacturer's license to operate a rickhouse as prescribed, provides powers and duties of the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 16th of this year, referred to the General Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments, Mr. President.
Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I was sitting off on the side here and we just jumped up to this bill. So I feel like I'm like the relief pitcher that's getting called in. So you guys are all lucky you have such a great pitcher who can take us home at the end of the day here. But I'm here to introduce LB 1204, which I brought at the request of the Liquor Control Commission, which would define a rick house and allow holders of a manufacturer's license or microdistillery license to operate a rick house under the Nebraska Liquor Control Act. I want to thank Chairman Lowe and the General Affairs Committee for prioritizing this bill. There's obviously other bills that are going to be in this package, and Chairman Lowe, I think, will introduce those, and other folks might talk about them. But I've had a lot of questions about what is a rick house, and so, you wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. Got to make you understand. Never going to give you up. Never going to let you down. But a rick house is an off-site bonded warehouse that is kept and maintained for the purpose of storing spirits in barrels for aging in order to impart flavor from the barrel into the spirits. Allowing these sites in a manner consistent with federal law will allow the Nebraska distilled spirits industry to grow. So I'd ask for your green vote on LB 1204 and for your support of the committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Lowe, you're recognized to open on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Relief Pitcher Kavanaugh. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm here to introduce AM 2640. This committee amendment contains 3 bills. First, LB 981 was brought to the committee by Senator Holdcroft. This bill simplifies compliance requirements for the charitable gaming, lottery, and raffle applicants. It was voted into the committee amendment with a 7-0 vote with 1 senator absent. The second, LB 1000, was brought by Senator Brandt, and it is a bill to provide lottery winners a prize greater than $250,000, the option to remain anonymous. This bill was also voted into the committee amendment with a 7-0 vote with 1 senator absent. Third, LB 1296 was introduced by Senator Hughes. This bill is about vaping and creates a Nebraska registry of products that are approved for the sale in the state. AM 2561 replaced the original bill and was adopted by the committee with a 7-0 vote with 1 senator absent. With that, I'd like to ask each of these senators to introduce their bill to you, starting with Senator Holdcroft.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Holdcroft, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So LB 981 was introduced on behalf of the Nebraska Department of Revenue Charitable Gaming Division and was heard by the General Affairs Committee on January the 22nd. This bill is intended to help simplify compliance requirements for many charitable gaming, lottery, and raffle applicants. So today, if you're a nonprofit and you hold a lottery and you make more than $1,000, there is a 2% tax on that, and you're required to pay that quarterly and file annually. If you conduct a raffle, and again, these are nonprofits, and you exceed a $5,000 threshold, same thing applies, 2% tax, quarterly payments, and annual filing. If you're below those thresholds, you don't have to pay the tax and you don't have to file. You do have to have a license. So what this bill does, and this was again brought to me by the Department of Revenue, is it raises the threshold to $15,000 each. So now you can make $15,000 on your lottery or raffle. If you exceed that, you still have to pay the 2%. You have to pay quarterly and file annually, but if you're below that, there's no tax and you only have to have a license. That's what the bill does, and I appreciate your advancement.
Thank you, Senator Holdcroft. Senator Duncan, you're recognized to speak. And wave. Senator Hughes, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a little miscommunication there. AM 2640 includes LB 1296, which I introduced to put in place guardrails to ensure that vaping products sold in Nebraska are complying with federal and state laws, to prevent vaping products from being marketed to minors, and to end direct online sales of vaping products to consumers in Nebraska. which has resulted in illegal products of questionable quality and origin bypassing Nebraska and federal laws being delivered to unsuspecting consumers here in our state. We work diligently with the Attorney General, vaping manufacturers, vaping retailers, youth nicotine prevention groups, and others to craft LB 1296. LB 1296 was included into AM 2640 by a committee vote of 7-0 with one member absent. I'd like to briefly explain the changes that we made to LB 1296 after the bill hearing and to reflect its current version as included in this amendment. This amendment removes the registry from the original bill. It came to our attention that the FDA-based registry was rife with problems, as shared in a recent Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, Wages and White Lion versus FDA. We pivoted, and instead of a registry, are now requiring either licensure by the wholesaler and retailer or certification by the manufacturer. This was done for the following reasons. As it currently exists, the Nebraska Tobacco Products Tax Act imposes tax and licensure requirements on certain categories of first owners. For out-of-state entities, both the tax and licensure are voluntary. We did not want to subject manufacturers to the PMTA tax if they were not first owners. To achieve this, we changed from a license requirement to a certification requirement on electronic nicotine delivery systems, sometimes called ENDS, manufacturers for both in-state and out-of-state. In-state manufacturers of ENDS products are still subject to licensure and taxation requirements, along with the new certification requirement. Out-of-state manufacturers are also subject to the new certification requirement. To clarify for my colleagues regarding the prohibition of online sales and delivery, this would not prohibit a local licensed retailer from letting a customer order a basket of products online and then come in person to pick those up at a licensed retail facility. The prohibition of online sales and delivery would apply to direct sales and delivery to consumers in Nebraska. It would also prevent a manufacturer from overseas who is not certified under LB 1296 from selling products to retailers or distributors in Nebraska. LB 1296 as amended would prohibit products from being marketed to minors. It also prevents products from using packaging and labeling that mimics other consumer products or from concealing the fact that the device is a vaping product. The $500 per product registry fee in the original bill is replaced with a $250 per product certification fee. We are willing to adjust this fee on select file based on how the new fiscal note would interpret the per product fee. This updated version of LB 1296 also requires manufacturers to attest that they fully comply with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection requirements. A large percentage of vaping products currently on the market in Nebraska and across the country have circumvented customs by essentially lying about what they are to avoid taxation and inspection. Overall, LB 1296 will provide clarity to consumers, retailers, and enforcement agencies of what products are legal and what are not permitted to be sold in Nebraska.
1 minute.
LB 1296 will better protect minors from getting a hold of products that look like highlighter pens, plastic drinking cups, hoodies, and backpacks used to disguise their vaping use. I would like to thank all the stakeholders who worked diligently to improve this bill after its hearing, and I urge my colleagues to support AM 2640 and the overlying bill of LB 1204. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Senator Dungan, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I do rise today in support of LB 1204 and the Amendment 2640. Anytime we can get a good rickroll here in the legislature, I appreciate it. So kudos to Senator John Kavanaugh for fitting that in here before we're even towards the very end of the session. I just wanted to stand up, I guess, give a brief little history lesson of something that I find very interesting as a fan of bourbon. Rick houses, as we're being discussed, have a deep history here in America. So bourbon is the only truly American spirit. And I think we should all be very proud of that. And so this bill seeks to allow for rick houses to be in Nebraska. Rick houses, as defined in the statute, are off-site bonded warehouses, which are kept and maintained for the purpose of storing spirits in barrels for aging in order to impart flavor from the barrel into the spirits. So some of the history behind this is the Bottled in Bond Act, which was passed federally back in 1897, was the first ever real consumer protection act passed by the federal government as it pertains to food or drink. So back in the late 1800s, people were selling whiskey, air quotes there for the transcribers, and bourbon with air quotes, but it was really anything but those things. They oftentimes were being flavored with iodine, tobacco, and any number of other things that were actually poisonous to those who were drinking it. And so because people were drinking this moonshine, essentially, and getting sick, the federal government stepped in and they passed the Bottled in Bond Act of 1897. And for something to be labeled bottled in bond is to essentially give it this assurance that it is of a certain quality. And so the very idea that we're going to be able to have rick houses here in Nebraska is to ensure that any bourbon that is made here in Nebraska would have that bottled in bond quality. So you might be asking, Senator Dungan, what does a bourbon have to be in order for it to be bottled in bond? Well, it's simple. It has to be distilled in the same distilling season, all of the bourbon in that batch. It has to have occurred at a single distillery, has to be aged for a minimum of 4 years, has to be bottled at 100 proof, which is 50% alcohol, if domestic, and the label must identify the distillery who made it, and the label must identify the bottling location if different than the distiller or the distillery. In addition to that, there can be no additives other than water. So I just think it's important we put in the record what bottled in bond bourbon is. This bill, I think, will seek to ensure further consumer protections and assurance that the bourbon we get here in Nebraska is high quality bourbon. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Senator Brandt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So now we have a bill that has vaping, bourbon, and gambling. Does it get any better than that? Thank you, General Affairs. So my part of this bill was LB 1000, and it's about 3 lines. And it says, and this is in the lottery bill, the division and any lottery contractor shall not publicly disclose the identity of any person awarded a prize of $250,000 or more, except upon written authorization of such person. What that means is Nebraska would join 23 other states where you can elect to be anonymous if you win a lottery prize over $250,000. And the reason I was compelled to bring this bill is all the stories and articles about lottery winners struggling financially and mentally a few years after winning big. A major factor in these stories is the amount of harassment winners receive from immediate family and friends to newfound fourth cousins and local charities or organizations. The harassment pressure to give becomes so large that many move out of state to get away from it. I don't think this bill will solve all of these issues, but I do believe the ability to remain anonymous to the public will allow winners to hold on to a sense of normalcy and not leave the good life. Nebraska should be a place lottery winners move to spend their newfound wealth. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Lowe, you're recognized, and wave closing on AM 2640. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2640. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
41 ayes, no nays on adoption of the committee amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is adopted. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Will Senator Kavanaugh, John Kavanaugh, yield to a question?
Senator John Kavanaugh, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
I just want to make sure, is Senator Lowe a co-sponsor of this bill? Because I have not voted for a Lowe bill since I've been down here.
I don't believe that Senator Lowe did co-sponsor this bill. I don't think we had any co-sponsors on.
Okay, I'll vote for it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Seeing no one else in the queue, members, the question is the advancement of LB 1204 to ENR initial. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
41 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
The bill advances. Items for the record, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, motions to be printed. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh to LB 137. Senator John Kavanaugh to LB 399. New A bill, Legislative Bill 1035A from Senator Hughes. This is a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate funds to aid in the carrying out of provisions. Legislative Bill 1035. That will be placed directly on general file. Additionally, Legislative Bill 856A, introduced by Senator Frederickson. It's a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate funds to aid in the carrying out of provisions. Legislative Bill 856. Be placed directly on general file. Legislative Bill 857A, introduced by Senator Dungan. It's a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate funds to aid in the carrying out of provisions. Legislative Bill 857. That will also be placed directly on general file. Name add, Senator Hunt to LB 145, Senator Conrad to LB 145, Senator Vargas, Senator Conrad to LB 196, Senator Conrad 138, Senator Conrad to 318, Senator Hunt 318, Senator Conrad and Hunt 319, Senator Hunt 382, Senator Conrad 383, Senator Conrad 447, Senator Jacobson 606, Conrad and Hunt 627, Conrad 776, Hunt 776, Hunt and Conrad 779, Aguilar and Lippincott 869, Senator Conrad 882, Senator Sanders and Day 937, Senator Blood 991, Senator Conrad 1025, Senator Blood 1025, Senator Dover 1114, Senator Conrad 1182, and Senator Blood 1184. Finally, Mr. President, priority motion. Senator Wishart would move to adjourn the body until Tuesday, March 5th at 9:00 a.m.
Members, you've heard the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Legislature is adjourned for the day.